I made this project here to kind of commemorate the release of Autograph. Each of these icons kind of represents how Autograph can kind of like unlock a world of magic to you. It's a very cool project, but it's a little bit big for a tutorial. So what I've decided to do is break up some tutorials based on this into the next series of tutorials. And we're actually going to start out by talking about shapes, shape layers, because so much of this project is actually based on shape layers. Now, everything that you're seeing here is made with shapes. They are so powerful in Autograph. Yes, even 3D objects, as we will see, all this stuff, everything that you're seeing here on the screen is basically a shape. It's all it is, shapes. So they get very powerful, very complex. So we're going to learn how to do all this stuff in the next few tutorials. Let's start out by talking about the basics of shape layers, though, shape generators to be specific. Now, there's a couple ways to access them. I can go over here to the shape tool, and once I click on the shape tool in the viewer, it unlocks or opens up all of these different components. Essentially, these two objects right here will create different shapes, and then these other tools are for selecting and editing those shapes. If I click and hold my mouse on this solid one, you can see that we can create one of these objects, like create polygon. So if I now click and drag, I will create a polygon. Just undo that. I can also create a Bezier shape with the points editable. So I can draw a rectangle or an ellipse, or I can just manually create Bezier points by clicking on the pen tool here and then manually clicking and dragging and creating Bezier points that way. And click on that last point to create a closed path. But what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to select this layer and delete, and I'm going to start from scratch because I think that that's kind of a more clear way to understand what's going on. So here in my timeline panel, I'm going to press Shift Q to bring up my little quick access menu here. I could also click this little button here, again, just a reminder that that's possible, and I'll click on Shapes. This creates a new layer with the source as a shapes generator. Now, it's probably good that this is not the default because it just creates a blank thing. But here's what's actually happening. Again, we have a shapes generator, but nothing inside of it. And there's kind of this very interesting hierarchy that's really essential to understand what's going on with shapes. And I'm going to start with a shape group. And then inside the shape group, I'm going to add a path group. I'm going to explain all this a little bit better in just a second. And then inside the path group, I'm going to create a shape. I'll create a polygon. And then I don't see anything. And that's because all of these shapes are just kind of like theoretical shapes. What they need in order to be seen is a style. It needs a fill or an ellipse. Otherwise, it's just kind of like an empty shape. And that can be useful in other instances. But really what we need to do here is come over to the shape group parameters and add, let's say, a fill. So now we have our little polygon here in the center of the screen. But really what I want to focus on here is this hierarchy of shapes. This is really critical to understanding shapes. It's not the most exciting thing to talk about in the world because it's just talking about like hierarchies and structure, but understanding this will help you get the most out of all of the tricks we're going to be looking at in this next section. So the hierarchy goes like this. The shapes generator creates a shape generator. And on the shape generator, we have shape groups, which are the most inclusive, can include the most stuff. Shape groups can include path groups and also these styles. So again, shape group contains path groups and styles, fill or stroke. Inside the path group, we have just paths, so different shapes. As you can see here, when we click this little plus icon next to path group, we have all these different shapes and even some generators that we can put inside of this path group. But it's very possible that you create one of these things and can't see it because it doesn't have a fill or a stroke. And again, the fill or the stroke cannot be part of the path group. It's only part of the shape group. So again, shapes generator, shape group, And then inside of that is the shape group and the styles. And then the actual shapes themselves are inside of path groups. Now, if I want to adjust the polygon, let's say we have this little guy's a little bit too small, and maybe we want to increase the edges to make him a hexagon, and we can increase the radius here to play with that. Each shape gets its own set of transforms. If you open up transforms, we can move this separately. This is not moving the layer or the path group or the shape group or the layer itself. We are actually only moving this polygon. I'm going to zero that out. Now, if I go back up to my shape group, I can click the plus icon and add a stroke. And you can see here that we could have fills on top of strokes, or actually this is a stroke on top of fill. And I can rearrange this order and put the fill on top of the strokes. You can see the difference that made in the edge. And so you can see the stacking order here. So it renders from top to bottom. So the last thing to be added to the mix is at the bottom of the stack. So that's the stroke. So now the stroke is on top of the fill. But again, if I put the fill at the bottom, it is rendered last. And so then the edges of the fill go over where the stroke is. That's also very important to remember. Also note that previously we've made text by going to the generators here. If I press Shift Q or click this little button here, you can see that we have text. And that's how I've been creating text so far in this training series. But it's actually better to create text this way through the shapes. When you create text as a generator, it's raster, it's limited. It was the first kind of text that was created in Autograph, and it's much more limited. So when you create text, it is better generally to go ahead and create shapes. So if I go to my shape group and I have this, if I go to my path group, I have this drop down and I can create text. That's how you want to create it here, because again, it gives you more power to do more stuff. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and delete the text here. Again, we can select the fill and we can get fill options. We can go to the stroke and get stroke options. Probably the most exciting being this trim paths kind of option where we have start and end. And I can, actually, let me just delete my fill. And so I just have this stroke. And so then I can adjust the end value and have this stroke draw on like so if I animate the end value. Or I could set it to a certain value and then adjust offset so that it offsets around the edges like so. Now there's a load of options in here with stroke style. I can add dashes, dots, etc. So, okay, that's really all I wanted to cover just for the setup part of talking about shapes. You've done really well getting to this point. You've eaten your vegetables, and now we can start using this stuff in really cool tricks in the next few tutorials. And again, keep in mind that later we're going to also make all this stuff 3D. So the 3D-ness happens in the fill and the stroke. So being aware of shapes and what you can do with them, how they work, how this structure works is really critical to making the best art inside of Autograph.